Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I'm just going to wait another minute while everybody gets admitted.
I knew of it. Wow, yeah, it was just.
They've got the wrong date on the slide. They said 2023.
Oh, thanks. I'm just seeing that now. Right. Hi, everybody. I'm Jamie Stefanski, and this is MSRGN Mountain States Regional Genetics Network Genetics Pop-Up, Colorado Transition Resources, Layers of Life. And yes, we do have the wrong date on the slide. My brain must have been thinking last year since I was in last year making it up. Sorry about that. It is 2024. If you're on watching, please keep yourself on mute during the presentation, and then we'll have time for questions at the end. So we are asking everyone to stay on mute during the first part, and then you can unmute to ask questions for the second part. Feel free to turn your camera on if you feel comfortable. We are recording and streaming live to Facebook. This is the active online participants list right here, number 3. And please use the chat feature, number 4, for question and answers or for any technology issues. Christy or Michaela, when she gets on, will be helping with that. If you want to ask a question verbally, please raise your hand once we get to the question and answer portion. You can go to your reactions area here and use the raise hand button. So first, I'm going to cover our funding statement. Like I said, this is being presented by Mountain States Regional Genetics Network, and they are funded by HRSA. So this event is supported by the Health Resources and Services Administration of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services as part of an award totaling $600,000 with 0% finance with non-governmental sources. The contents are those of the author, myself, and do not necessarily represent the official views or nor in an endorsement by HRSA, Health and Human Services, or the U.S. government. For more information, you can visit hrsa.gov. So today's agenda is I will introduce myself and Mountain States Regional Genetics Network, go over the purpose of this genetics pop-up, which is the Colorado Transition Resources Layers of Life, and then present some other trainings, webinars, and resources that you might be interested in. And then at the end, we'll have your questions. So I'm Jamie Stefanski, and I have navigated genetics for my own children with rare genetic disorder, TELO2 or Yu-Huber-Fong syndrome. There's about 40 in the world. My children at this point are age 17 and 15. They were diagnosed when they were, I think my son, I don't know, it's been so long, he was between 8 and 10 years old, and then my daughter would have been between like 5 and 7 years old. So it's been a few years that they were diagnosed. And I have lived in Colorado with my family since 2017, as well as 5 other states, and have experience navigating the many systems, including genetics. I also work with children and families as a physical therapist and ABM neuromovement practitioner. I am a family navigator at Family Voices Colorado, and I was formerly the Mountain States Regional Genetics Network State Teams Coordinator, Colorado Genetics Navigator, and was a Colorado State team member. So that's how I came to be involved with Mountain States Regional Genetics Network, was through having children with a genetic disorder and being part of their state team and then working for them. And then I took the role with Family Voices and have transitioned to Family Voices and out of Mountain States. So, but I'm still available to be contacted and help with any questions you may have regarding access to genetics. How can I help a family navigate genetics? By discussing next steps with family who has concerns, for example, ways they can talk with their doctor, providing resources to families who have encountered barriers, accessing genetic services, connect families who have received a genetic diagnosis to support organizations, and helping families with accessing Medicaid, Social Security, and waivers. Mountain States Regional Genetics Network is a network of 8 states, so Montana, Wyoming, Nevada, Utah, Colorado, Arizona, New Mexico, and Texas. This network is funded by HRSA, the Health Resources Services Administration, and funded currently for a 4-year grant cycle from June 1st, 2020 to May 31st, 2024. Mountain States Regional Genetics Network is one of 7 regional genetics networks. So we're right here. And there's also the National Coordinating Center that coordinates the work of the networks, and the National Genetics Education and Support Center provides national resources and trainings to families about genetics. So the mission of Mountain States Regional Genetics Network is to, and the other 7 regional genetics networks, as well as the Family Support Center, is to improve access to quality genetic services for medically underserved populations. Mountain States programming objectives, sorry, I'm having a tongue tied today. To have a regional infrastructure, they have state team, our region has state teams and an advisory committee. So each state normally has a budget each year and sees how they could best utilize that money to help their state population have access to genetic services. Mountain States educates providers and families. Some of their programs are Time for Genetics, Genetic Ambassadors, and Genetic Navigators, helping to facilitate telegenetics and support telegenetics, training for genetic professionals, and sustainability and long-term impact. This is MSRGN's management team: Kathy Hassel, Janet Thomas, Lisa Creel, and Michaela Welsh and Christy Weiss. This is the fiduciary agent, the people who manage Mountain States funds, and they are Texas Health Institute. So Ankit, Sherry, Stephanie, and Katie. And the 5 initiatives for Mountain States are state teams. And each state team has a disciplinary team who are volunteers. Their Time for Genetics program, which helps educate primary care physicians and provides them with resources. Primary care algorithm, so the developmental delay algorithm and the Eilers-Danlos algorithm. Genetic navigators, which are family-to-family navigation of genetic service system in each of the states. And then a genetic summit. So the 2021, 2022, and 2023 genetic summits are available in recording form on the Mountain States webpage. So to get to the meat and potatoes of the of the session. This is what some of the attendees may have received. It is a rack card that was the project for the Colorado State team. And I know they were mailed out to 20 of the pediatricians' offices across the state, one pediatrician's office for each of the 20 regions. And the 20 regions were identified as in the community center board regions. And then each community center board's early intervention department received a stack of them as well. I think about 50 of them. So I also have a whole box still that I've been handing out through Family Voices events and through my personal interactions. You can access it today by scanning this code right here or going to this QR code or going to this webpage, www.mountainstatesgenetics.org/cake. And sharing it with anybody you think would be, would find it useful or helpful. There's something in the chat here. I'm gonna check, let's see. So Christy put the resource in the chat box, so you can click on that to have access to it as well. So if you'd like to follow along and access the resource while I go through it today, you can scan the code or click on the link that Christy put in the chat box. So the Colorado Transition Resource, Layers of Life, are resources for individuals and families with disabilities or genetic diagnosis as they navigate the challenging transitions that occur throughout the lifespan. So this resource starts with birth and newborn screening. There we go. 0 to 3, so the early intervention, 3 to 5 years old, preschool, 5 to 21 years old, so school age, 14 to 21 years old, the transition period from childhood to adulthood, then 18 plus years old, and then aging. So each layer addresses that specific age group. So I am going to stop sharing for a moment because I know if I just click to my next thing that I want to and I'll share again once I get the page up. There we go. I didn't want to just click to my other page because I know it wouldn't have changed over. I've done that too many times to know that you'll still be looking at the other share. So here's the page, Mountain States Regional Genetics, or mountainstatesgenetics.org/cake. And here's the cake. At the bottom is a button for resources and a button for genetic resources. This resource button here encompasses all of the resources that you'll see throughout the cake. So it's just a list of drop-down boxes that have the resources for the whole cake. And then the genetic resource button here at the bottom are genetic resources that will not be found within the cake, but are genetic specific. So we'll start here with genetic specific resources. So you have the Colorado Genetic Connections Facebook group that I lead, the Mountain States Regional Genetics Network link, the Colorado State Team page, Mountain States Facebook page, and Mountain States Twitter account. So the first drop down is for finding a provider. If you need to find a provider, there's a link to go to access getting in touch with a genetic provider, or looking to connect to get a referral to a genetic provider, I should say. And then national genetic resources, so a list of your national genetic resources. So I'll just call out a few: the National Coordinating Center for the Regional Genetics Networks. They also have a repository of research articles. Let's see. The National Health Institute is on here, the Rare Disease Network, Undiagnosed Disease Network. And I'm sorry if you hear any background noise. My daughter is off from school today, so due to the weather. And then we'll go to the next one. So the next one is regional genetics resources. So that would be the Mountain States region specifically. And then we have Colorado specific resources. And this is a resource that I will cover, that you'll get a link to specifically later in the presentation, but this is Red Flags for Genetics that Mountain States developed, helping people or families identify if their child might benefit from genetic access or resources, maybe thinking that their child might have something genetic involvement. Then you have genetic testing resources. So I'm not going to click down all of them because you can now see how the resource works. That you have the title, you click the box, and then you get the drop down. Primary care resources, patient and professional advocacy and support groups, genetic research, insurance. And each one has a description of when you might utilize it. Education, care coordination, getting a diagnosis, resources for those with undiagnosed conditions, family history, and basic genetics. So I'm going to go back over here and click on the cake, and it will take me back to the main cake page. And then we can start with birth and newborn screening. So birth and newborn screening is a little different than the rest of the cake because it only has newborn screening stuff in it. So it has a box on newborn screening and who to connect with for second steps. And then also normally involved in newborn screening when a child is born is early hearing detection and intervention. So then it gives you how to connect with EHDI, the early hearing detection screening. And then find a genetics provider, and then additional resources that a family with an infant identified with a genetic disorder as a newborn might benefit from. So that Red Flags for Genetics, connecting with Mountain States, and then newborn screening information. And then Christy also popped in a link in the chat that might be of interest to some about looking for feedback from those that may have received a positive newborn screening result. So to get back to the main page and select another layer of the cake, I'm going to click on the cake over here to the right again. And then we'll go to 0 to 3 years old for early intervention. So the rest of the cake is set up by, these are going to be your main categories. And then each layer will build upon these. So early intervention how to connect with early intervention. So a young child that may have a disability or developmental delays or genetic diagnosis might need early intervention services. Your Social Security Administration, linking to them, because a child with disabilities, if they might have a financial need for SSI, and if they don't, you go through the Social Security Administration. You can go through the Social Security Administration to get the disability determination so that they can qualify for other benefits such as Medicaid or waivers. Medicaid application. So if a child has a genetic diagnosis, they might qualify for different Medicaid products, whether it be buy-in or long-term care benefits. Community Center Board, which is now Case Management Agency. So this drop down does need to be changed to Case Management Agencies. But the link will take you to the Case Management Agencies. And they are the organizations that help regulate the waiver funding for the children. And children can qualify for them through multiple different means, whether it be through intellectual disability or medical disability, medical needs, or functional ability. Accessing a genetics provider. And then here's all that fun stuff that we just kind of want to hide from, but is very important for planning for the future. So wills, letters of intent, and life course planning. So there's some resources there for that as well. Financial planning. A lot of you may have heard about special needs trusts and ABLE accounts. On this resource, we're not able to provide like counseling or anything of that nature, but it does provide some resources, I guess, as far as definitions and such for what they are and information about each of them, those options. Insurance, so making sure you're covered as a family, you know, whether it be health insurance, property, disability, long-term care, and life, and then additional resources. So these additional resources, you know, assistive technology, mobility, also ways to modify toys to help children with disabilities access toys, wilderness on wheels, ways to get out in the community, different organizations to get involved. So kids with disabilities can participate in sports or learn how to ride a bike, skiing, all sorts of great other resources here. Okay, clicking back on the cake so we can go to 3 to 5 years. So preschool. So now, as you can see, we have the resources from 0 to 3 minus the early intervention, because if you're 3 to 5 years, the child will have aged out of early intervention, but you have all those other drop-down menus. And then above that, you have preschool, child find. So this way the families have a link directly to how to find their local child find and get hooked, set up with preschool for their child. And we will click back on the cake to get to the cake again. And Now we're at school age, 5 to 21 years old. And again, you can see those same drop-down boxes from 0 to 3 years old and 3 to 5 years old. And then above, you will no longer see the early intervention or child find preschool box because they will have aged out once they got to school, but you will have the links for the Colorado Department of Education and some other important guides on IEPs and academic standards and resources for IEPs and transition to kindergarten for those that, for a child that might need an IEP or a 504 that has disabilities or needs within school. And we'll click on the cake again. And now we're at 14 to 21 years old, so transition period. Let me tell you, that's a fun time. Since my son is 17, I'm currently going through that process of transitioning my son to adulthood. So again, you have all those links from previous. But we've moved that Social Security Administration link up to the top because that's an important one, because when you get to that transition age, the family will need to get a disability determination, a new disability determination once the child turns 18. So here's all the new drop-down boxes and resources. So like I said, you'll need that Social Security Administration again at 18 so they can get that new disability determination so that they can qualify for adult resources and services. A link for transportation. There's all sorts of transportation agencies and organizations to help for those that aren't able to drive. So whether it be medical or non-medical transportation, thinking about living arrangements once the child becomes an adult. So a bunch of different resources and different options for living arrangements. Getting an ID. And also there's links for a disability placard for the car. Guardianship and decision making. That's an important part of the transition period. If the child is not able to make their own decisions or care for themselves, the parent will need to seek out guardianship or some sort of decision making if that's appropriate. So there's resources there for that. And then some resources for transitioning from pediatric to adult medical care, because many of the physicians that work with our children don't work with them into adulthood, so they have to find a new physicians. Looking into vocational resources, so you have the Division of Vocational Rehabilitation and some other employment, college, and vocational training options. Some of these can also be used prior to adulthood. I know my son works with DVR currently, and he's still in high school, but public schools do have transition programs as well. And then writing transition plans into the IEP. So once they turn 14, actually it should probably start thinking about once they're 12, but writing it into the IEP once they turn 14, planning for the future, what those goals and aspirations might be. And then getting on a waiting list for the adult waivers. So information about the adult waivers and options as far as waiver funding and once they turn 18 and what benefits might look like when they're 18 and above. And then heading back to the cake for the adult. So here's all the resources from all the drop downs from school age, so 5 to 21 and below, and with the addition of the transition stuff, because I have come across quite a few families, even in my short time with Family Voices, that they have young adults and they didn't access the system as when their children were children, and they need to do that as a young adult. So those resources are below here. And then you have Medicare eligibility. So as they get older, they become eligible for Medicare. So that's there. And then we'll go to the last layer of the cake, aging, which is the same as the adult. So you have all the information from before, and then the Medicare eligibility. And also thinking about the Social Security Administration, because at some point, as the parent accesses SSI, or if the parent is on SSDI, the adult child may be eligible for SSDI. So those are all the layers of the cake. So I'm going to stop sharing so I can see everybody on the screen. And then I'll share the presentation again. Whoops. Let's see. So I'm going to go through these other resources in the presentation, and then we'll take your questions. So to connect with us, you can email the Colorado Genetic Navigator, email coloradogenetic@gmail.com, which I believe Christy is checking the email on. Correct me if I'm wrong. And then you can connect with MSRGN or Mountain States Regional Genetics Network through Christy at kweese@mountainstatesgenetics.org, or you can connect with me at Family Voices Colorado at jamie@familyvoicesco.org. And I'll just leave that there for a moment so you could take a picture or screenshot or write it down. Sorry for the raspy voice. I feel like it's so dry. Okay. Or to receive updates on genetic pop-up dates and other MSRGN news, you can scan this QR code here or go to mountainstatesgenetics.org. And I believe it's under, I think it's under family and connect.
Center for Families, but I'm putting it in the chat for you, Jamie.
Thanks, Christy. And then here's the QR code if you want to quickly access the Colorado State Team page. And here's that Red Flags for Genetics resource that I had mentioned earlier. So the Genetic Ambassadors, which is part of Mountain States, did a survey and asked, I think it was about 100 families or so, about, what were red flags that they recognize now when their child was little, or that were that pointed towards genetics, and then they categorized them. And from that, they developed this resource in these categories. So developmental delays, physical features, feeding issues, behavior, failure to thrive, strength and tone, and then other. So it's normally not just one of these items, but multiple of these items that kind of point you in the direction of genetics. Maybe considering looking into accessing genetics. And it's also in Spanish as well. And that's a great resource to share with families when they're not quite sure, and it kind of, having this in front of you kind of puts the whole picture together. Oh, sorry, I didn't want to advance and now it went too far. There we go. This QR code is for genetic recipe infographics library. So there's some great resources that help to explain genetics using cake recipes and spelling. And then here is a program that Mountain States has called Genetic Connections. It's workshops for early intervention professionals, and kind of defines genetics, gives you vocabulary, who might benefit from accessing genetics, or connecting with somebody from Mountain States or myself to help them navigate the system, or connecting, developing that language and how to speak with their physician about their concerns. And then it also goes through 4 family case studies, and then the red flags and next steps. And the QR code there can get you to connecting with and asking for having one of those workshops. And this QR code is to access the library of genetic summits that have been held. And there's some wonderful talks at each of those summits on both for professionals and families. Some specifically about different genetic disorders, others about life planning, different resources. So and then if you could fill out the survey for today, so we can gather input on what you thought of the resources and the webinar, that would be wonderful. I think Christy's gonna drop that link into the chat box as well. And then time for questions. So please type any questions in the chat or raise your hand and wait to be called on. And then once you're called on, mute your line so you can ask your question in person. See if I can, there we go. So you go to your reactions icon at the bottom of your screen and click on your raise hand button if you want to raise your hand and ask it in person.
I have a question for you, Jamie. I'm just curious if you might be able to give a little bit of background of how the cake came to be. I know this started in a discussion as a state team a long time ago, and so maybe just giving a little bit of that history for everybody might be helpful.
Absolutely. So it originally started, the resource list originally started when I came to Colorado. So like I mentioned in my intro, this is my 6th state I've lived in, and I'm a PT as well as a parent of kids with, 2 kids with a rare genetic disorder. So I'd attended lots of events and seminars and things, just kind of trying to gather information and learn as much as I can and prepare for the future. So I had like this whole big box of resources that I'd kind of gathered from where I've lived before, and I moved here to Colorado, and I'm like, okay, most of this is not useful to me anymore. It's from other states. I need Colorado resources. So I started gathering things for myself and for my patients and clients that I worked with as a PT and neuromovement movement practitioner. And then I joined Mountain States through Christy, because she saw that we knew each other prior to myself moving to Colorado, and the state team needed somebody who was going through navigating the systems and could help in that area, and had a little bit of knowledge. So I joined the Colorado State team, and they were like, well, we need some resources. So Mountain States developed part of the Colorado page with the list of resources that that we had collected as a team, and I had made additions because I belong to SEAC, the special education advisory committee for the school district that I'm in, and had also called and made connections as part of that team. So I put all these resources together and said, okay, here's some resources, and the other teammates brought together some resources, and we put it on the page, and it was okay. It was a list of resources. We said, well, we really need a roadmap. There's nothing that exists that's a roadmap from start to finish, from birth to the end, aging and end of life. We have like the community center boards that deal with, early intervention, and then you have transition, but there's nothing really in one place that gives a good picture or tells you step 1, step 2, steps 3, and so forth. So that's when we did a little bit more digging, gathered some more resources, and it ended up being 52 typed pages. Quite a bit of that got whittled down, because it, for what we needed to present, needed to be free and had to have certain criteria, since it's HRSA funded. But so that's kind of how we ended up with the cake, because we wanted a roadmap for each age range of what each stage of life would need to be able to access, and what would need to be done at each stage of life for a child with genetic disorder or disability, special healthcare needs. So
awesome. Thanks for sharing that, Jamie. I was part of some of those conversations, and I remember the cake idea coming up with the idea of celebrating birthdays and celebrating different milestones in a child's life as they grew into an adult. And so it's neat to see how the idea of a roadmap turned, which you would think like a picture of a road with a car on it, turned into this beautiful birthday cake. So we do have one comment in the chat as well. It says, these resources are absolutely outstanding. What a lot of work has gone into this. What are the plans for keeping MSRGN resources updated and available after RGN funding ends this year? Do you want me to start off by answering that, Jamie, and then you can chime in?
Sure, sounds good.
Yeah, so for those of you who are joining the call for the first time or have not heard this news, the Regional Genetics Networks will not be funded after May 31st, 2024. And so all of us are working on specific sustainability plans for our websites, for our resources, for the work that we've done over the last 4 decades of in one way, shape, or form. One of the things that has been decided within Mountain States is that we are attempting to keep the lights on our website for 2 years beyond May 31st, 2024. It will become a static website though at the May 31st date, meaning that none of those resources will be updated past that date. So we are working in each state with our state teams that Jamie mentioned to talk about sustainability of resources and moving resources off the MSRGN website onto other state-based websites or regional-based websites that may be able to sustain and continue updating those resources. And I know there's been some conversations brewing in Colorado around that as well. Did you want to comment at all, Jamie, on anything else?
Just that I'm working on connecting with other organizations to see about housing the cake resource and maintaining it so that it can be kept up to date. So, I would recommend accessing it now and saving any of those links that you want. But I am working on trying to get another organization to house it and maintain it. And they're very interested, but it will take some time and funding to do so.
And I guess I would just throw out to anyone who's attending today who has ideas or maybe perhaps works for an organization that would be interested in housing some of the things that you have seen Jamie present today, please reach out to us. I'm open to having any and all conversations regarding this. We're also having some national conversations with national organizations. So it's our hope that maybe we can get these on some national websites as well, so that they won't just benefit our region or our states in our region, but a wider audience. One of the recommendations I would have, like Jamie said, about accessing these things now, my recommendation would also be to download. So many of the resources like the red flags for genetics, some of the cake infographics are all on our website as PDF documents. And if you just click anywhere you see the little PDF icon, if you click on that, a PDF viewer window will open, and in the top right-hand corner, there's a line with an arrow over it, which is the download button. You can click that and it will download right to your desktop. Feel free to put that in your file folders, make a file called genetics. So the next time you work with a family that is involved with a genetic condition or navigating a genetic condition, that you can find those resources easily, and feel free to print and share them as needed. So we just want to encourage everybody to do that now while the website is live and being updated. Does anyone else have any questions? I'm not seeing any in the chat here, but happy to unmute lines here as well to ask Jamie specifically. I have another one, Jamie, just wondering about, I know we put this out to a lot of early intervention providers and professionals to join this webinar today. So what suggestions would you have, having gone through early intervention and having worked in early intervention long ago for yourself? What suggestions would you have for what resources or what parts of the cake or how to use the cake with families in that 0 to 3 timeframe?
I'd suggest that they go to that early intervention, the 0 to 3 layer. Start with the early intervention, getting the services that they need. And it's easy to get overwhelmed because there is so much, but just take it one step at a time. So going from the top of the list and working their way down for the drop down boxes. So not opening all of them at once, but just going from one layer to the next. And if they need help navigating connecting with resources or figuring out how to get the disability determination or applying for Medicaid, then they can contact myself at Family Voices, or they could also email info@familyvoices.co, and our intake.org, and our intake person will get them connected with a family navigator to help them with those things. to help them walk through the steps.
Yeah,
what
great,
needs to
great
be done.
suggestion. I'm even thinking of all those boxes, those could almost be a topic for each home visit, right? You could just
Mhm.
pick one topic and use those as the resources, or even show the family, hey, we're gonna look at a box here and there's some resources, but let me help you walk through this topic. And so it's not so overwhelming, because we know as family members that we've been given lists of many phone numbers to call and emails with many links in them, and it can be overwhelming for a family. So great advice on just taking it one box at a time, one step at a time. There's some more comments just saying greatly appreciate this amazing resource. Thanks for all the great information and resources you shared. But I'll just ask if there's anyone else that has any questions for Jamie before we wrap up for today. Please either unmute your line and ask them, or type them in the chat here, or raise your hand and we can call on you. For those of you who are still on the call, I just put the evaluation survey link again in the chat. So if you don't mind giving us some feedback, that's really helpful for our reports to HRSA for our funding. So if you don't mind having just a few minutes to respond to that too, that would be helpful. And another comment came in, just love the resources. Thanks so much for sharing. We really
my
appreciate
pleasure.
everybody. I really appreciate everybody being here today and listening to Jamie's presentation and this pop up. And I have one last question, Jamie. If I'm not seeing any others pop up in the chat here, but approximately how long did it take to curate all of these links? I know you kind of were giving the history, but it's really been kind of a 4-year process. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, it probably about 4 years. Yes, it took a few years.
It's been the state. It's a big focus of the Colorado State team for this entire grant cycle. So I admire both Jamie's stick-to-itiveness, and I see a couple other team members on the call. I see Maria and I see Renee. So I just want to thank those others Colorado State team members that have been part of those conversations for a number of years.
I want to thank everybody for joining today and listening and spending your time learning about the resource. And I hope it's useful to you and your clients and patients.
And I'm just going to ask Jamie, I just see Estella and Rachel have unmuted their line. Estella or Rachel, do you have a question that you have for Jamie?
No, thank you.
Okay. Sorry, I just didn't want to miss any questions. How about Estella? Any question? And no? Okay.
No, thank you.
Okay, no worries. I'll put you back on mute. All right, that's all I'm seeing, Jamie, in the chat. So if you want to sign off a little early, we'll give people back a couple minutes for a bio break.
That sounds like a plan. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.